The phone lit up at 1:14 a.m., a soft glow against the dark, the kind of light that never brings good news. Ruth blinked awake to a message that split her world clean in half. David, we've all agreed you're no longer part of the family. Please don't come to any gatherings. Beneath it, 3 tiny hearts appeared: Jennifer, Mark, and even Tyler. Her grandson. For a long minute she just sat there, phone in hand, watching her reflection in the black glass. Then she typed 5 words that tasted like steel. Thanks for confirming. Payments cancelled. Outside, the rain started against the windows, slow and deliberate. She leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, and felt something unfamiliar spread through her chest. It wasn't grief. It was the quiet hum of freedom. Hours earlier, this same living room had been full of noise, her son's voice asking for just one more month, her daughter-in-law's careful smile as she hinted about tuition bills. Ruth had written the checks like always, because that's what mothers do when they're told they're needed. But now, staring at the tiny hearts under that message, she realized she hadn't been needed in years. She'd been managed. The refrigerator motor kicked on, and the sound made her laugh. A strange, breathless laugh that ended in a sigh. She opened her laptop and began clicking through the list of auto payments: mortgage, car, cell phones, credit cards. Every box she unchecked felt like cutting a string that had been wrapped around her for decades. By the time she was done, her coffee had gone cold and her phone was buzzing, 30 missed calls in 15 minutes. She silenced it, drew the curtains, and sat back in the dark. Somewhere out there, her family was panicking. She pictured Jennifer pacing their kitchen, David shouting, Tyler confused and angry. For once, she didn't feel sorry for them. When the first streak of dawn slipped through the blinds, Ruth whispered to herself, let them wonder who I am without their bills to define me. The world outside was gray and still, the kind of morning that promised change. And for the first time in her life, Ruth Henderson believed it. By morning, the world had learned that Ruth Henderson was done being quiet. David showed up just after sunrise, knocking with the urgency of a man who'd never heard the word no. She didn't rush to the door. She let him stand there long enough for the knocking to turn into pounding. When she finally opened it, his face was blotched with anger and sleep deprivation. Jennifer hovered behind him, arms crossed, wrapped in a robe that screamed entitlement even at dawn. Mom, what the hell did you do? He demanded. Ruth stepped aside without a word. The smell of their panic filled her kitchen before either of them spoke again. I did exactly what you asked, she said evenly, pouring coffee. You wanted distance. I gave you distance. Financial, emotional, geographical, take your pick. Jennifer's tone came sharp and polished. You can't just cancel everything. The mortgage, the car, I can, Ruth interrupted, setting her mug down with deliberate calm. And I did. The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. David sat heavily at the table where he'd once eaten her Sunday breakfasts. We'll lose the house, he said. Tyler's tuition is due. You can't do this to us. To us? Ruth repeated softly. You already did it to me. Jennifer's voice cracked into something smaller, half plea, half command. We didn't mean what we said in that message. Families fight. You know how things get misinterpreted. Ruth leaned against the counter, studying the woman who'd orchestrated her humiliation one polite smile at a time. Jennifer, I raised a son who let his mother be deleted from a family group chat. If that's a misunderstanding, it's a very clear one. The air hummed with the sound of David's phone buzzing, a call from the bank, probably. He ignored it, eyes flicking toward his mother's laptop still open on the table. The cancelled payments stared back like tombstones. When they finally left, the house felt heavier and lighter at once. Ruth washed her coffee cup slowly, listening to the quiet settle around her like armor. For years she'd written checks to buy peace. Now the silence was paid in full. And somewhere deep in that silence, a new thought began to take shape: this wasn't just an ending. It was a reckoning waiting to happen. That night, Ruth sat in her living room with a blanket over her knees and a folder on the coffee table. It was the same folder she'd once used to keep grocery receipts and birthday invitations. Now it held something colder, printouts of every automatic payment she'd made for David and Jennifer over the past 3 years. Mortgage, tuition, car insurance, credit cards. $4,350 a month. She'd expected to feel regret while reading the numbers. Instead, she felt clarity. Every line item was proof of how invisible she'd become. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Henderson? This is Margaret Chen. I handle your investment accounts. Ruth straightened. Margaret, yes. I was planning to call you. I've noticed some unusual activity, large recurring transfers. I just wanted to confirm they were intentional. They were, Ruth said. Until last night. There was a pause. Then Margaret's voice softened. Good for you. I've seen too many clients drained by family obligations. Would you like to come in tomorrow? We can make the changes permanent. Permanent. The word landed like a key turning in a lock. The next morning, Ruth walked into Margaret's glass-walled office wearing her blue wool coat and a look that dared anyone to pity her. As the numbers came up on the screen, $287,000 in total transfers, Margaret's eyebrows lifted. Ruth, this is substantial. So was my denial, Ruth said quietly. They spent 2 hours closing accounts, redirecting payments, and consolidating her assets under her own name only. By the time Ruth left, her life felt smaller but cleaner, like a house after a long overdue purge. Back home, the doorbell rang. A man in a tailored suit stood on her porch, holding a white envelope. Mrs. Henderson? You've been served. She took the envelope, her heartbeat steady despite the words she already suspected. Inside, on embossed letterhead, notice of intent to file, elder financial abuse. Jennifer's name was at the bottom. Ruth sank into her chair, staring at the accusation that turned everything upside down. After a long moment, she began to laugh, not bitterly, but with disbelief so sharp it bordered on awe. They hadn't just bitten the hand that fed them. They'd declared war on it. The papers lay open on the table like an accusation carved in ink. Elder financial abuse. Ruth read the phrase again, her stomach tightening around every syllable. It was the kind of lie that could stain a person forever, the kind that made neighbors lower their voices and banks start making courtesy calls. For a few hours, she did nothing. She brewed coffee she didn't drink. She stared out the window at the pale afternoon light, watching the wind bend her rose bushes flat. Then, almost on instinct, she called Margaret. They've filed, Ruth said simply. Then we fight, Margaret replied, without hesitation. I'll refer you to someone good. 2 days later, Ruth sat across from attorney Patricia Morse, a woman with sharp eyes and the kind of composure that came from years of watching people implode under pressure. Patricia flipped through the pages, lips pressing into a thin line. They're claiming you used money to control them. Classic projection, she said. But this opens a door for us to counterclaim financial exploitation. Do you have proof of your payments? Ruth slid the folder across the desk. Patricia's eyes widened at the first spreadsheet. You're sitting on a goldmine of evidence. We can not only defend this, we can win it. That night, Ruth dreamt of her late husband, Henry. In the dream, he was sitting at their old kitchen table, smiling the way he used to before the years of loss hardened her edges. You waited too long to draw a line, he said gently. But better late than never. She woke up with tears on her cheeks and resolve in her chest. The following morning, Patricia's team began drafting the countersuit. While they worked, Ruth received a message from Tyler. Asterisk Grandma, Dad says you're suing us. Is it true? Asterisk She stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, asterisk It's true. And it's necessary, asterisk No typing bubbles appeared after that. Just silence. By the end of the week, the first hearing was scheduled. As Ruth ironed her blouse the night before, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't someone's mother or provider. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a courtroom and tell the truth, no matter who it destroyed. And tomorrow, she intended to. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and nerves. Ruth sat straight-backed at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Across from her, David stared at the floor while Jennifer whispered furiously to their attorney, her nails digging crescents into a legal pad. The judge entered, a woman with silver hair and the kind of calm that made people confess without meaning to. When the case was called, Patricia rose. "Your Honor, we're here because my client has been accused of manipulating her family through money. What the evidence will show is the opposite, that she was systematically drained by the very people who now claim to be victims." The judge nodded. "Proceed." One by one, Patricia laid out the evidence: bank transfers, receipts, screenshots of Jennifer's messages asking for a little help, month after month. Each document was a mirror held up to years of exploitation. Jennifer's confidence began to crumble. David's shoulders sagged. When it was Ruth's turn to speak, she stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. "Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I spent years thinking love meant paying other people's bills. I thought that's what good mothers did, stay useful, stay needed. But the truth is, they didn't need me. They needed my silence." Her voice stayed steady, even when her son finally looked up. His eyes were wet, but she didn't flinch. "They told me I wasn't part of the family anymore," she continued, "so I listened. I stopped acting like family. And now they call that abuse." A hush spread through the room. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. Patricia handed over one last document, the group chat message that started it all. 5 words glowing on a printed page, *, we've all agreed you're no longer part of the family, *. The judge studied it, then looked up. "Mrs. Henderson, you've been more than generous. The court sees no evidence of abuse, only exploitation. Judgment in your favor." Jennifer gasped. David buried his face in his hands. Ruth exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The gavel came down, sharp and final, but the sound that filled her chest was softer, like the quiet relief of a door closing on a house she would never enter again. Spring arrived quietly, as if the world was trying to make amends. The dogwoods outside Ruth's window bloomed white against the sky, and the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and freedom. On the dining table sat a stack of envelopes addressed to people she'd never met, letters from strangers who'd read about her case in the paper. Some thanked her for her courage. Others confessed that they too had been used, drained, dismissed by their own families. Every envelope was a reminder that her story had outgrown her. Tyler visited one Sunday afternoon, taller, thinner, carrying a law textbook under his arm. He stood awkwardly in the doorway until she motioned him in. "You look tired," she said. "Studying for finals," he replied. "Elder law. Guess I have you to thank for that." They sat on the porch, the silence between them soft instead of strained. "Dad's working off his debt," he said quietly. "Community service. Counseling too. He talks about you a lot." Ruth looked out at the yard. "Some things you fix. Some things you just learn to live beside." Tyler nodded. "I'm proud of you, Grandma." When he left, the porch light stayed on longer than usual. That evening, Ruth opened a fresh notebook. At the top of the first page she wrote, "The Dignity Project, a support group for seniors reclaiming independence." Below it, she listed names from her letters, people who wanted to meet, to talk, to start over. As the clock ticked toward midnight, she closed the book and walked to the window. Across the street, a family's laughter floated through the open air, warm, ordinary, untainted by money or obligation. Ruth smiled. For the first time in decades, her life wasn't measured in deposits or withdrawals. It was measured in boundaries, in peace, in the small joy of hearing her own thoughts without interruption. She poured herself a cup of tea and whispered into the quiet, "I didn't lose a family. I found myself." Outside, the night wind moved through the dogwoods, scattering petals across the porch. Each one landed with the hush of a page turning, a new story beginning. And inside that small, calm house, Ruth Henderson finally exhaled, free, whole, and entirely her own.